There's a reason why we fought for it as an ideal in civil society, that marriage ought to be between a man and a woman. Why would we do that, Greg? Why would we go out and do Proposition 8? Why did we fight in Hawaii and Vermont and California and Massachusetts? Why do we do all this kind of stuff? Well, I believe the seed of it is the doctrine that we understand about the new and everlasting covenant. And we don't want the rain to pour so heavy on everybody that they have no hope, that they can't find the ark, they can't see it, because society, mixing metaphors, because society now is so corrupt that you only see corrupt.
All right, welcome to Cwic Show. My name is Greg Mattson, and I am your host. In this episode, we bring on Paul Mero, who is a culture warrior veteran. He has worked for 4 decades in D.C., the state of Utah, with the church, and is really in on the nitty-gritty of the culture war, including the fights that the church has made in the past against law and policy in the U.S. Paul has recently come out with a new book called Defeated, which talks about the loss of the culture war, the lessons that he's learned in several of the battles that he's been in, and the way he sees that war today. I've been in correspondence with Paul and some of his friends for the last couple of years and really enjoyed the email threads that we've been on. And I love his direct, blunt point of view on several matters. Give yourself some time to warm up to him. I think you're going to really enjoy this entire interview. Now, this episode is brought to you by Go and Do Travel. I am the official spokesman for them. The Gospel on the Nile cruise has been sold out for all of the spring cruises in 2025, but we've opened up September, October, and November. So 3 new Gospel on the Nile cruises. This is a very popular destination and experience. And just noting that these things are filling up consistently should tell you what type of an experience this really is. You can go to cwicmedia.com, that's CWICmedia.com, scroll to the top to trips and events, and then scroll down to Gospel on the Nile. I'll put that link in the description box as well. Now let's jump in here kind of abruptly into my conversation with Paul Mero.
I am an adult convert. My wife, Sally, and I were married at 18 years old. And when I was 20 years old, looking for purpose in life, a couple young men my age knocked on my door, and I became a Latter-day Saint. My wife joined a year later. We went to the D.C. temple a year and a day later, moved out to BYU 2 weeks later. This is, by this time, it's 1980. That's back when BYU took stupid people, you know. I mean,
I'm one of them. I was one of them.
I'm not saying that there aren't stupid people there right now, because there's plenty of evidence that they are there. But at least academically, you know, I mean, I was a nobody. I worked in a warehouse. And so I went to BYU, got a degree in public policy, and moved back to where we were married in Northern Virginia, just outside of D.C. Of course, you know, the Mecca, if you want to work in public policy, or if you want to work for the government or whatever. So I spent 10 years working on Capitol Hill in D.C. for 2 different congressmen, with a small gap where I lobbied for an organization.
Did you have, as a youth in high school, did you have what will I call it, a political ideology already set in, or?
No, you know, but it is a great question. My high school years were mostly smoking pot and playing basketball. And okay, if the random young lady came into my life, then hey, that was good too. But no, but it is interesting when, excuse me, when I joined when I actually was in the process of getting baptized and searching out religions, I knew, even at 19 years old, I knew two things, and this is funny how this guided me. I knew two things. I knew that abortion was killing a human being, and I knew that homosexuality was not right. That was my 19-year-old mind. And so as I sought out different religions, there were only three that actually believed the same thing. Catholics, Southern Baptists, and Latter-day Saints. And
Back when the Latter-day Saints were actually vocal about those things.
yeah, well, and it just so happens that Baptists and Catholics didn't knock on my door. So here I am, as a Latter-day Saint. But no, I picked up my interest in government at a small little college in Texas right after we got married. We just left Northern Virginia to kind of grow up together. And I flunked every other class except government. And I thought, okay. So anyway, we headed back and went to BYU, came back, worked on Capitol Hill. And in 1997, that was my last year on Capitol Hill, I had already created a nonprofit called Projects for America. And it allowed me to continue a lot of the work that I was already doing congressionally on culture war, social issues. The two guys that I worked for are probably the most conservative guys that have served in modern Congress, a guy named Bill Dannemeyer and another fellow named Bob Dornan.
I remember Bob Dornan.
Yeah, you would, because he subbed in for Rush Limbaugh many times, and but yeah, both of them from Orange County, California, down in your area. Yeah, and so anyway, I came out of there working on this Projects for America and certain different culture war topics. And I ended up, I'm shorthanding all of this, but I ended up merging my Projects for America with an organization in Rockford, Illinois, the Howard Center for Family, Religion, and Society. Three members of that board, of the board of the Howard Center, were Latter-day Saints. One was now President Oaks. Another was a fine gentleman. He's passed away, Jack Wheatley. But at BYU, there's a
The Wheatley
department
Institute.
called the Wheatley Institute, right?
Yes.
That's him. That's his family.
Okay.
And then the third was a beautiful woman, Catherine K. Swim. And she and I became fast friends because of different projects that she was interested, that we were working on then. And it just worked out that, well, her son had created something called Sutherland Institute.
Yes.
In Salt Lake City, which is a state-based think tank. So they lost their president after a few years, and she called me and said, "You need to apply." And I said, I don't want to raise my children in Utah. We have 6. I just didn't want to do that. And she says, "No, you need to do that." So I did. I wasn't her son's first pick for president. I was the second, but there's a sweet story that goes with that maybe some other time I can share with you. But I ended up at Sutherland from the year 2000 till 2014. Separated from Sutherland. It was one of those deals where the new chairman of the board and I did not see eye to eye, and they fired me. So I picked up a national job called the Leadership Project for America. A couple wealthy guys from back east wanted to bring civility and leadership into politics. And they created a C3, C4, and a PAC. And I ran all of that for a year because it was 2015 and into 2016. And guess who was running for president in 2016? Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And he is anything but transcendent or civil. Leadership, maybe. But at the time in 2016, he was a curiosity, right? I mean, he got the lowest when we ranked all of the presidential candidates, all of them, Democrats included, like 30 something individuals. Only Hillary got a lower score than Donald Trump. So I did that. That happened.
So the two with the very lowest score were the two nominees.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if it would have kept going, probably same thing would have happened in 20. But I came back to Utah mentally and politically, and started my own think tank, Next Generation Freedom Fund. And I was going to work on religious freedom issues, but I had a friend named Stuart Reed, who was a state senator in Utah, and he convinced me to work on poverty issues from a conservative perspective, that he thought I could bring value there. And so I did that. I worked on intergenerational poverty, and then after a few years, that led, after success, frankly, I thought maybe I'm retired. And then a position came open to do government relations for Western Governors University. A couple of friends of mine had worked there, and I got to work from home. And I told them two things. By the way, Greg, I said, I want to work from home and leave me alone. I'll go do my thing. And they did. And that lasted for 5 years until this September. And now I am retired.
Okay. So deep background in politics. You were mixing in with a lot of the, who knows who of the world, or who's who of the world.
Yeah.
Especially in conservative politics.
Oh,
your
yeah.
book that you came out with, right? So your book here, Defeated,
Yep.
is an interesting title. And I know this is a play a little bit on the cover of this is a play on your last book also, but who's defeated, and what you've got, the book is about an autobiography of your own history with the culture war in America.
Yeah.
What is it that is defeated?
Great question. Thank you. Because it could be that, as I say in the preface, I lost. But the culture war was lost by the late 90s. And the entire culture war. And so you think of any issue in the culture war. I mean, we could list 30 of them right now, that conservatives and progressives have fought for the last 40 something years. We lost every battle, but the premise or the thesis of my book is that we lost the war before we lost all these battles. We lost all these battles because we lost the culture war foundation. And as I say in the book, those three things are: we lost defining what it means to be a human being. Mm-hmm. We lost the definition of true freedom. And we lost what I just describe as moral imagination, meaning our general relationship to God.
So let me ask you real quick, Paul, on this then. If my wife used to listen to a conservative talk show host named Michael Medved.
Oh yeah.
Right. And Michael Medved would come on, and I remember hearing him, and he said, you're happy cultural warrior was kind of his thing, right? His
Yeah.
little self-title
Right.
on this. So he's out what he believes, at least, or believed that he was fighting the culture war,
Yes.
right? You're saying it was already lost.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to have similar thoughts on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But why those three things, right? The debate over what it means to be a human being, the debate over the meaning of true freedom, and how we lost our moral imagination. Was there anything specific at that point in the late 90s that brought us to that point? How did we get there? And were we flirting with it before, or was there?
Yeah.
How did this happen?
Yeah, because the first big culture war fight. There's probably three things that compete for the first. One would have been contraception. Before abortion. Contraception was illegal in most states. School prayer, and then abortion. So I guess I because of how I've framed my argument, I would have to say that along the way we lost, and so there was a cumulative loss in the war, not just these battles, not just these battles, but we were losing the battles because we lost these other issues that I described. And for instance, what does it mean to be a human being? All right, if you haven't figured that out, one way or another, first of all, you have no voice in the culture war. But if you have figured it out one way or another, you're on one side or the other. And so, in this case, obviously, think of abortion and what does it mean to be a human being? What it means to be a human being typically is comprised of three things: human dignity, human potential, and human happiness. And so in the abortion fight, of course, there was a lot of talk of when life begins and all of that. But the reality is, you think about abortion generally. Is there dignity? Is there an element of human dignity in abortion? Is there an element of human potential? Is there an element of human happiness? Now, if you're a progressive, you're going to answer that question 3 times yes, because you're so focused on your own personal autonomy. You don't care about that other human being inside you. It might pain you. You might feel guilty, but ultimately you've chosen personal autonomy. And I'm excusing, like we all do, the health of the mother and rape and incest and, things that everybody understands that can justify an abortion. That aside, those few times aside, every other time is really an exercise in choosing your personal autonomy. And so, and so, what does it mean to be a human being? And frankly, if you understand, like I'm explaining it, human dignity, human potential, and human happiness. In other words, that you have an eye towards the broader humanity, that you're not self-absorbed, that you're not just worried about your own autonomy. And the more popular term for autonomy, Greg, is choice, right? This is my body. I'll do what I want with it. This is my choice. People think and this is a big part of my book. People think that liberty and freedom are the same thing. Liberty is just personal autonomy. Liberty is like, I'm just going to choose to turn left instead of right, in my car. I'm going to buy oranges instead of apples, but freedom is different. Freedom is a moral ecology, and it's comprised of individual liberty, but it's also deeply based in order. That you can't be a free society unless you first have order. This has been a long-standing argument between libertarians and conservatives, and this is why I can't stand libertarians. I've met so many.
Well, tell us what you really think, Paul.
Yeah, so many smart individuals, and they're completely stupid when it comes to understanding their own ideology or seeing it that way. But liberty and freedom are two different things. All of the things I've just described in this heap of verbal vomiting I'm doing right here, is the culture war. And if you believe that like faith precedes the miracle, if you believe that order precedes a free society, then you are a conservative culture warrior.
Interesting.
If you don't believe that at all, then you're on the other side.
Is it just that progressives don't believe in an order, or they believe in a different order?
Oh, they absolutely believe in order because, they tell us all what to do all the time. That, we can't say this, we can't say that, you can't go here, you can't go there, you can't associate this way. If you're at work, be careful what you say, you'll lose your livelihood. Abortion, just pick the issue then. They'll tell you exactly what their order is. But their order's chaos. It's just chaos because it's all built on personal autonomy. It's all built on this cult of this is my body and I will do with it what I want. And frankly, philosophically, as I describe in the book, there's a reason for that. There's a reason, a philosophical reason where they come to this conclusion. And it has to do with the separation of mind and or spirit and body. And they separate the two. This is what makes it easy for them to say, this is my body, I'll do what I want with it. Well, if you're a Christian of any real kind, you understand that your faith is based around, not just the atonement of Jesus Christ, but the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Well, what happened in the resurrection? It's body and spirit come back together again. There was a separation, and now we're back together again. So if you're a conservative culture warrior, you're not gonna buy into this. I'm trying to remember, sorry, Greg, the name of that book in the 70s that came out, My Body, My Choice, or
I think that's
something like that, some ridiculous thing that was very popular. And so frankly, we get back to what does it mean to be a human being? Well, for a conservative culture warrior, it means first and foremost, those three things that I mentioned, human dignity, potential, and happiness, but it also means that body and spirit are one. They are one. It's
interesting. You have, Michel Foucault. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a philosopher of postmodernism, and he
died of AIDS.
Died of AIDS. He's a very eccentric, let's say, person, but he also very, very hard on the left. And he has a quote that is very interesting. In the Book of Mormon, you have, in Mosiah, there's the discussion from King Benjamin about putting off the natural man.
Yeah.
Which is really more about put off the body or master the body, right? From the spiritual standpoint. Mm-hmm. Foucault's quote, and he is the most quoted and referenced person in all of academia in the US, by the way. His quote is, the body, the spirit is the prison of the body. It's the exact opposite. The spirit is the prison of the body. It just made me think about that as you're talking about the two.
Absolutely. And in the philosophical pedigree, I guess I'm trying to think of the right word, is dualism. Mm-hmm. And that idea of dualism is what Foucault describes, and what modern progressives are expressing when they say it's my body, my choice. They're just separating the two things, and that gets into so many culture war issues. Mm-hmm. When you believe that, then same-sex marriage, easy. It's easy to believe in. If you believe that spirit and body are two separate things, if you can do anything you want with your body and justify it, then
all promiscuity. I mean, that's been the whole DNA of the hard left since the very beginning is sexual promiscuity. It's always there, which goes against the order of the family. And so it's interesting you brought up those three issues of kind of the issues. What was first? So you have abortion, you've got contraceptives, you've got prayer in school. Those three things fit under two categories. One is religion, and the other is family, right? And those seem to be oftentimes part of that order that is always attacked, right? It's feminism coming in. Let's break up marriages. Let's push away from marriage, and abortion. Let's push away from family. Contraceptives. Let's push away from family. All those things seem to go against an order that we would say is of God. Is it not worth fighting for, though?
I've fought for it all my career. Even after I knew that the war was over, I fought a different fight. Essentially, I fought on behalf of my church. That's what I felt like called me back to duty, if you will. Let me just say, if we have a minute here,
sure.
Let me just say, if somebody asked me, what book would I recommend that anybody who leans conservative should read first and foremost, besides the Book of Mormon, is a book called The Quest for Community by a sociologist named Robert Nisbet, Nisbet. And when you were talking about religion and family, what Nisbet did, and he wrote this right after World War II. I think it was 1953 that this book came out. So he's hot off the heels of Stalin and Hitler. Mm-hmm. And as a sociologist, he says, do you know why they were successful? Because both of them were able to kill the intermediate layer of society between the individual and the state. So they got rid of family, they got rid of religion, they got rid of unions, they got rid of charities, voluntary associations. It's that intermediate layer of society that actually sets our morality, sets our values. So when Hitler and Stalin got rid of those things, because individuals innately need to belong to something, well, there was nothing left to belong to except the state. And then all of a sudden the state sets your morality and values. You wonder how otherwise regular Germans could go to work every day and gas Jews, and do horrible things and go home and bounce a baby on their knee. How can you put that? How can you fathom that? Well, you can when you imagine that your God, if you will, the state is telling you that it's okay to do both of those things. And so the culture war too has largely been over defending that intermediate layer of society against those who would get rid of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's to me, it's always been mostly family. I mean, religion comes in there sometimes, but there just seems to be. I mean, you can look at the numbers today. I mean, the states where you have a stronger family structure, 2 parents in the home, more kids, the fertility rate is higher, all lean to the right, all of them.
Yeah.
Right. And as you go down, you get further to the left and further to the left and further to the left. And I'm not saying that everyone on the left is against family or anti-family or anything like that, but the structure of supporting that order of a family seems to coincide with more of a worldview that leans to the right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I could have stopped fighting this culture war fight in the late 90s. By the way, you asked what maybe was, if there was a moment, I guess, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but was there a moment at which all of a sudden it was like light bulb on, we've lost? And what I use in the book is a moment, and it's a decision. And it's Casey versus somebody, 1992, abortion. And it was when Justice Anthony Kennedy wrote the majority opinion, basically reasserting the standard of Roe v. Wade. And in the Casey decision, I haven't memorized the quote. I should, because I pin everything on it. He's basically saying that the heart of liberty is whatever anybody chooses to do, which is why the same justice could write the majority opinion in Lawrence over sodomy laws, could write the majority opinion on the same-sex marriage case, and a couple others that fit those categories. And he gets the heart of liberty right. It's whatever you want. Unfortunately, he doesn't get the heart of freedom. The heart of freedom is a whole different thing. And there's just so many people who use those two words synonymously. And they're not synonymous. Liberty is a component part of freedom, that moral ecology that creates freedom. So you get to true freedom among those three things I said we lost, those three ideas. You get to true freedom by understanding that order precedes, that order is the foundation of freedom, that order and liberty combined in balance create a free society.
Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting insight. So you talk in here about, I mean, you were obviously very invested in the culture war, have been very invested in the culture war.
Right.
You talk about you're angry that you didn't do more looking back on things, that you didn't persuade people more. And you're even angry at yourself for feeling this way at this point. Do you still feel that way at this point, that you didn't do enough? Do you look back and say, well, it was always a losing cause? Should you have been involved the whole time? Are you glad you were involved? Where are you at now?
I believe this is just where the Lord put me. When I started on Capitol Hill, I started as a press secretary, and I didn't have, dreams of culture war in my head. I just happened to go to work for one of the most conservative members of Congress, Bill Dannemeyer. And I happened to go to work for him in 1987. Well, that's the first year that Congress dealt with AIDS. And my boss was the ranking minority member on the subcommittee that dealt with the issue. So all of a sudden, I'm in the middle of it. And then we realize that public policy isn't about public health. It's about the politics of the gay agenda. And everything that we did with COVID, we weren't allowed to do with AIDS. You couldn't, for instance, contact trace. With COVID, they might ask you who were you around? Where did you travel? In 1987, you couldn't ask that. The gay community would say, we're not going to tell you who we had sex with. We're not going to get names on a list so that you people can have a list of gays, or whatever. Anyway, it was treated politically and not as a public health issue. That's what started it all for me. So I wasn't looking for it. It as I say in the book, it found me. And whether I liked it or not, I became an expert on those particular issues. And then because the issue of homosexuality has been at the core of nearly every culture war fight over the last 20-something, 30 years, that's put me right in the center of it constantly.
Yeah, which is also a family issue.
It is. Well, yeah, it is. When you're a conservative culture warrior, you're trying to defend what we call the natural family, which other people would just say marriage between a man and a woman and children and, leave it to beaver world kind of thing. But yeah, I guess I found myself, and maybe it was my personality, Greg, I don't know, but I was always the tip of the spear. I wasn't the hand saying, let me help you up. I was always the tip of the spear that was pushing in a fight. And
give me an example of that. What's an example of where you were the tip of the spear?
What I just said about AIDS, our office. I mean, if you understand congressional offices, typically, unless the member, the congressional representative is very strong personality. My guy was a strong personality, but even so, I wrote everything. That this guy said, did, with few exceptions. And because he was in the position on that committee, on that subcommittee, he went toe to toe with the chairman of that committee, who was from West Hollywood. All right. You can't think back to 1987 and think of Fullerton in Orange County and think of West Hollywood. You cannot get a greater collision of philosophies than that. And these two guys played it out. I mean, it was right out of central casting. And yet, we realized that once we realized that the issue wasn't going to be about public health, once we realized that chairman, Henry Waxman, was going to make it about gay rights, that's when we went on the offensive against gay rights. And what back then was called the gay agenda or the homosexual movement or whatever. And so, you can play defense and you can play offense. We were defending the family, but we were defending the family by going on the offensive to stop, in this case, the homosexual movement.
Okay.
There's so much, isn't there?
There is. I just there's what do you think today? I mean, there are many different points of view right now, especially for Latter-day Saints, as far as what is your involvement with a culture war? Should you be involved with a culture war? We've got a mutual friend that has a very different idea than what I do. I listen to what he's saying, but I'm like, I don't know if I grasp all of this. I don't know that I agree with this type of a stance of not being involved, at least to some degree. Where should a Latter-day Saint be in terms of, and I'll say on any position or what they're fighting for, if they should fight for anything? Should they be involved with these civil issues? And is it important that they're involved? Is it, again, is it a lost cause that they're fighting? What should their involvement be?
Great question, because that's what it looks like on the ground. And so on the ground, I'm a father of 6 and a grandfather of 23. I would say that a faithful Latter-day Saint, mother or father, ought to be in control of their family, and that includes the circumstances under which they place their children. The provider has to go out and work and provide. Both have to raise children. But I guess I'm sorry to dance around this, so I'm not going to dance around this. I'm just going to tell you, I think faithful Latter-day Saints ought to pull their kids out of public school, out of circumstances under which secular society, the progressives, are bombarding them constantly. It's almost like after 8 hours of kids inside a public school in Utah, they will come home and you have to deprogram them. It's just like, and so I think parents have to seize the opportunity. They have to seize control of their lives. If they're truly faithful Latter-day Saints, they understand that the goal for that family is exaltation. And the process of exaltation includes establishing Zion. And I get to the end of my book where I talk about this much with the same kind of passion that I'm trying to express right now. Latter-day Saints, good people, think that you socialize children by throwing them out into the world. Isn't that what we were told, to be tried and tested and all of that? But, I just keep saying, just like there's one atonement, there was one exit out of the Garden of Eden. We don't have to keep replicating that as families. We don't have to keep kicking our kids out of our homes and into the world. we can go ahead and raise these children in our environment, which hopefully is a healthy environment, an environment free of fear. We're not afraid of the world. If the world came after our children, we would step up. And that's often what happens, right? When you have your kids in school and all of a sudden there's drag queen storybook hour, and you're wondering, why is my child sitting there? Well, I mean, and there's just so many other examples that seem much less dramatic, right? I mean, they could be in a history class, and all of a sudden they could get some BS about history.
DEI or whatever else, or
whatever it is. I mean, it doesn't even have to be DEI. It could just be wrong-headedness about our founding fathers, or the Constitution, or what the Declaration of Independence means, or why we went to war, or why we didn't go to. I mean, there's just so many things that the public school system, representative of the secular world, will pump into the heads of our children. So I would say, it with all candor, without guile, take control of your family. Don't lose control of your family, and keep your eye on the prize. And the prize is exaltation. Zion, your family is a little practice area for Zion. And your home ought to be a place where there's peace and love and kindness and learning and truth. And so there's, as I say in the book, there's really only two safe places left on the face of the earth: your home and the house of the Lord, period. That's it.
So that is an example, and I agree with that completely, actually. But I do a lot of work on education. That to me is an issue of a proper retreat, perhaps. Is there anything on the offensive that a Latter-day Saint should be involved with, going out into pushing with issues, getting involved with organizations, pushing for voting, whatever else it might be? Is that a proper place to be? Because there's also the thought that, we just want to build Zion and let the Babylon be Babylon. Let it be on its own.
Yeah.
And I have some issues with that. I'm not saying I'm right, but I have a lot of questions about that kind of black and white separation that I hear sometimes.
So I call the separation strategic disengagement. And so to address the other side of this coin that you're asking about now, we're citizens of the United States of America, and we need to be involved. We need to be knowledgeable about candidates for office. We need to understand what we believe and how that might be represented by a candidate. Most Latter-day Saints have their kids in public schools. We need to understand what's happening there. If you're going to put your child in that environment, you better put yourself in that environment as well. And so, it's hands-on, whether you're at home or whether you've lent your children out to other people. You need to be hands-on. So one of the difficulties with me saying the culture war is over and that it's been over is that there's always a fight. There's always something going on. There's always some crazy nonsense like transgender stuff. There's always something nutty that all of a sudden crops up and is absolutely antithetical to what we believe as Latter-day Saints. And so, do Do we get involved? I would say, because I've already said the culture war is lost, because we've lost the fight over those three big ideas I mentioned earlier. I would say there's nothing to fight for anymore except your family, except your children. And that's why I talk about strategic disengagement. I'm not saying become a society of monks and go into a cave and separate yourself. I'm saying be a family, and parents seize control. There's a chapter or two in the book, Greg, where I talk about how religious freedom is gone and we don't even know it. Our church doesn't even know it. President Oaks argues for religious freedom all the time. And although you haven't heard about it lately, but at the core of losing religious freedom is the loss of individual religious conscience. That was done in 1880, whenever the Reynolds decision was over polygamy. I hate to use that issue because polygamy, plural marriage, whatever you want to call it, is a third rail in our church. You touch it and everybody starts panicking.
Oh, yes, definitely.
But that decision threw the baby out with the bathwater. Fine. Stop plural marriage, stop polygamy. But you have to hang on to individual religious conscience. And the Supreme Court back then threw that baby out with the plural marriage bathwater. And that debate has been going back and forth for decades, all the way up to now, with a conservative Trump court, say like the Hobby Lobby decision, where they didn't want to include abortifacients in their health care plan, but Obamacare insisted on it. Well, they took it to court, conservative Supreme Court landed on the side of Hobby Lobby. And then there's the cake baker, and there's the florist, there's the computer programmer. These individuals are fighting for individual religious conscience. Are we able to wake up in the morning, Greg, and live our faith? Are we able to do that?
Sure.
I give an example real quick. In 1988 in Virginia, we decided to homeschool our children. We were criminals. In 1988, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, homeschooling was illegal. Was illegal unless you were like an Amish community. And then there was a religious exemption. Well, we claimed a religious exemption, even though our church didn't have a position on it. We just said, based on our faith, we believe that parents have the right to control the education of their children, and parents have the right to revelation. Well, you can imagine what the Attorney General of Virginia said to that. What are you talking about, revelation? Who are you people? You're crazy. If you don't put your kids back in school, we'll take the kids from you. We fought that. And we won. And, that's in the book. But that's what I'm talking about. So if there's an issue, even if you have your kids in public schools, or you place them in the care of anybody else besides yourself, you better be hands-on. If it was the Boy Scouts, you better have been hands-on. If it was gymnastics for girls, you better have been hands-on as a parent to protect that child. So yeah, that to me is what's left of the culture war. So when somebody says, well, you know what, we're going to have a ballot initiative that says that in the state of Utah, nobody can transition from male to female or female to male. I would say, don't do that. Just don't do that. You might win the ballot, but trust me, you're going to lose the culture.
Would you vote on it?
Yeah, I'd vote on it. Yeah, I would vote on it because I'm a citizen, and all of a sudden there it is. It's in front of me. But I would never encourage any of my political friends to introduce that kind of.
So is there a responsibility though beyond your family at all? I mean, obviously that's number one, but is there not a responsibility that says, okay, you go beyond family, you're worried about the community, you're worried about your neighbor. Can I offer some type of influence, or at least, if not influence, even just awareness of a knowledge of something to help them out with something?
Yeah.
You don't understand the trade. I look at someone like Elon Musk, right? So he's spent his lifetime on the left, and the trigger for him, as some would say, a red pill moment, right? For him was that his son was saying that he was a girl.
Yeah.
Right. Now he wasn't living with him, I don't think, at the time, but he was saying he was a girl, and they were brought to the hospital, and the doctors told him, Elon, the father, if you don't do this, he's going to kill himself. Right. If you don't do this, he's going to kill himself. So he did it. Right. And so his son transitioned into a girl, air quotes.
Yeah.
And so I just think that's tragic. That is absolutely tragic. Should I not have some type of a duty of some sort that says, look, I need to go beyond my family also with others. And I'm not really an activist, but for my show, at least, I mean, I'm really into awareness.
Yeah.
Right. I want information out there as much as possible.
Right.
So at least you see it. You can maybe make a better decision yourself. Is there no responsibility for us to put that out there in the culture, or to put that out there with a community, to follow? I don't know, beyond anything that just our responsibility as parents.
I get what you're saying, and I would say yes, because just like we're missionaries in our church, right? We have truth. And it's incumbent upon us to share truth. Again, strategic disengagement that I argue for isn't living in a cave somewhere. But here's how I would flip the script of what you just described. If we feel, and we do, have a duty to share truth, to share love, to share kindness, to share all the virtues, all godly virtues, we have a duty to share those as we have them. And I say this in the book, flipping the script, don't wander into Babylon to do this. Don't try to convert Babylon. Invite those individuals into your Zion environment. Invite them into your world. Just a practical example. When our children, our oldest was probably a young woman in the church, 13, 14 years old. And, you hit a point where the kids are like, hey, can I go sleep over at Bobby's house? Can I sleep over at Jane's house, right? We always said no. The few times we did, the kids came right home because they were like, that's a weird house. And we were uncomfortable there. What we told kind of a disgruntled oldest daughter was, you know what? Why don't you invite Becky to sleep over at our house? then Becky, is in our environment. She'll feel, if we have virtue in our home, she'll feel it. She'll get it. So instead of sending my children out into the world as premature young missionaries, or me, holding, what would it be, Greg? Book readings, or I don't know, whatever we used to do. When we had people over and we would talk about issues and stuff like
Sure.
that. And that's the way we used to try to influence our neighbors. Was to have, I was going to say tea parties. We don't have that kind of thing in our church, but I'm getting at.
Sure.
And those days, I think, are long gone. I think the best way to do it is if we're good missionaries and we're trying to share virtue in a civil society, the best way to do it is to invite those you care about into your world. Don't step into Babylon. If they're in Babylon and you want them to be in Zion, don't walk into Babylon. Invite them into Zion.
There's one thing, and I agree with that to some degree, at least in terms of where we're
But
at.
what are you struggling with there?
I struggle with duty. I struggle with a responsibility. I obviously have a responsibility with my own family that is first and foremost what I'm here for, right? But it's I struggle with and I know you quote some things from Mormon and Moroni and Elm and other things about them finishing, right? I'm not going to say they are defeated, but they finish with things. But they, for the most part, Mormon is out there battling regardless of the absolute defeat, and
he knew it.
And he knew what was happening, and he's still out there leading this apostate, iniquitous, murderous group of people
because he's
going to influence one person. I don't know, but he has a duty. I think he's like, these are my people.
That's right.
They're my people. I'm going to go fight for them. There's a loyalty to some degree, regardless of the Babylonian influence, so to speak.
Yeah, but if we go through the narrative of the Book of Mormon, the largest part of the narrative is strategic disengagement. Were there missionary opportunities? Yep, there were. But the reality is that King Nephi, King Benjamin, King Mosiah, Alma, they're still the Nephites. There's still the Nephite nation. And then there's a Lamanite nation. They're our brethren. We love them. We wish they were with us. In fact, we'll send out a few people to go talk to them because we love them. We care about them. But the culture war, if you will, was we want them to join us. We're not going to sacrifice and join them. They have to join us. And that's really what I'm getting at here is if we feel the duty to help in society with issues that come up, I think there are better ways to fulfill those duties than the traditional way we've done so for the last 40 years.
I don't doubt that at all.
I think I give one example in the book where we were fighting federal sex studies for youth, and we had them. We had those killed. HHS, the head of HHS, a guy named Lewis Sullivan, he's like, done. I don't want to mess with you guys. I don't want you having a million Christians block my phones, for days, which is how we used to fight the fight on the ground. But all of a sudden, there's this report that we thought we killed. We thought we killed this one report, and it pops up. Who did that? Oh, it turns out the assistant secretary did that. It turns out the assistant secretary is a guy named James Mason, who is a Latter-day Saint. So I have this crazy idea. Brother Mason, would you and your wife like to come over to our house and have family home evening with us? He said, yes. We had family home evening together. We had a delightful time. And he and I worked out this problem. He ended up killing the report and the studies. And later in life, of course, he went on to be the head of the CDC and all. He's a big shot, right? And later in life, he moved to Utah. He was called to be a General Authority 70, and I was head of Sutherland Institute. And he was a donor to Sutherland Institute. He would write me notes, and he would just say, hey, you're doing great work. My point is, what happened there was something personal between people who should have had a basis of faith in common from which we could build ideas and arguments in public policy. I think that's what's left for us, Greg. I just don't think that there's any more getting up on a soapbox on a corner and shouting out what we believe, metaphorically. I just don't think it's leading an initiative anymore. I would say no more Prop 8s, no more Proposition 8s. We're done. It's over. At the end of the book, I recommend that our church just talk about things that they feel like we should address as individuals in a free society. But as far as their actions and activities as a church, they should only protect what's against existential threats. That's the only thing they ought to organize over. I'm not saying
is family an existential threat?
No.
Okay.
It's I don't think the family is under an existential threat unless we let it happen as parents. We need to control our family. So when another gentleman and I wrote a book called The Natural Family, a manifesto, we laid it out. We tried to make an argument the best we could why family is the fundamental unit of society, and it's the foundation of a free society. And we talked broadly. That was in 2007. That was about 10 years too late. Why did I do it? Why? I was the one that came up with the idea. Well, again, at that point, I felt like I was defending my faith, my church. And I wanted Latter-day Saints to have a Bible for the family so that they would know why family is the fundamental unit of society, not the individual, not the church, not the state, not the corporation, the family. And, that they could carry it around, that they could read it. And of course, nobody read it. Nobody reads stuff like we think that they should. And unfortunately, the squeaky wheel still gets the grease. And you see this in Trump world right now, right? You know that there's the ones who screech, right? What's that lady's name with the three names? Marjorie Taylor.
Taylor Green.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what a moron. And why she is a representative, I don't know. But I'm glad I don't live in that district. So there's these folks that are just screeching all the time. And everything is a problem. Everything is an issue. We see this, Greg, inside our church. We see it when we go to church. There's always a busybody. There's always somebody that is in somebody else's business constantly, and I would tell my wife, it's like, she's been a Relief Society president a few times. And I'm like, don't be that Relief Society president, please. Just mind your own business. Love people, do what the bishop asks you to do, but don't be a busybody. Don't say that the sky is falling. The sky isn't falling. Focus on what's most important. And we're told by a prophet of God what's most important. And it's our family, because the family is the key to exaltation. And it goes through the doors of the house of the Lord. So the ordinances matter. Gathering Israel, building Zion, that's what matters. And we can do this most effectively inside our own family. And if we have people who are in our ward, they're our neighbors, and we sense that they're really struggling, that they really want to bless their children, and they really want to have that solid family, we should reach out and invite them into our home and let them feel what it's like. Let them see that children don't have to fight with each other, right? I mean, remember King Benjamin, that's what he was saying. Don't let your children fight with one another. What's the matter with you? Quit your squabbling, all these things. So on the ground, I think that's what's real for me, Greg. I've thought about running for office when I get back to Utah, depending on where we end up living. Right now, we think we're going to end up in Saratoga Springs, and I would happily run for the state senate there. But then I also face, when I look in the mirror, well, what does that mean? Am I still going to be a fighter? Am I going to stand up for what?
You'll have a lot of people trying to draw you into that, for sure.
Absolutely. And that's my opportunity in my head, my pea brain. That's my opportunity to welcome them into my world and let me influence them by bringing them to me, as opposed to, if I'm sitting in council somewhere, I want to say things where others will go, I want what he has. I want to experience what he just said. And I think in your podcast, I think that's at the, not putting words in your mouth, I think that's at the core of why you do what you do. I know you want dialogue, and I know you want awareness, which is seriously needed. But you're also wanting to bring people into your world.
Sure.
You do cruises, right? Mm-hmm. There's your world. Mm-hmm. And you bring people into that world. And maybe they don't know what you know. So you're imparting knowledge, truth, wisdom. But in our neighborhoods, our homes become that ship. Our homes become that place where I think we should reach out and just really keep our eye on our neighbors who are sincerely struggling and wanting to do something about it. You can't do anything about the ones that don't want to do anything about it. But if they feel like they want to, like, what's wrong with my children are fighting all the time? They're bickering and they want to go here and they want to go there. What is happening? That's the kind of family that I think we would invite over and talk to. Because, Greg, one time we were that family, and somebody did that for us.
Okay. Pay it forward. So a couple thoughts on what you're saying here. I kind of see these. This goes along. Tell me what you think of this.
Yeah.
One of the things that I see, I think about the psychological and sociological differences, say, for example, of someone who has a worldview that's on the left as compared to someone on the right. And one of those is an arc of time. And that is that, a progressive side of things is going to see things that we start off, whether you look at it just as purely biological evolution, you start off as an amoeba and then move on to this progression of where we are today, right? And the same thing can be said of culture. Yeah. And civilization, right? We start off as this little amoeba, gathered around a campfire. And then we've progressed all the way to where we are today. And we are always progressing and always moving forward in this arc of time toward becoming this new man and new woman of some future progressive utopia, right? The other side is, and I would say this is more of a religious conservative arc of time, is that it is dispensational. And there is truth given and the keys that are given, the authority is given, and you have, let's say, most or all of the package that has been given to you, and then you move forward for a while, but eventually, right, entropy ends up coming in and the society starts to devolve, and then it falls apart. And we see this is the example that we get from the Book of Mormon, from the Jaredites and the Nephites, right? That is the primary message. This is going to fall apart. Yeah. And so you need a restoration, a new dispensation, bring things in. And that's how I would say things are. When you say the culture war is lost, to me, that's just part of the devolving of our civilization that is pretty much impossible to reverse. And that doesn't mean, again, I don't know about the involvement here, but it's impossible to reverse. I kind of look at this like, I think that we are in a time like Noah. And not that there's a flood, but the rain has started. And the rain is not going to stop. The rain will not stop. And so, as you say, there should be I think, a warning voice. There should be awareness that Noah's given out to everybody, but he's inviting people to the ark, so to speak. He's inviting them in and saying, look, you come with me to the ark. The flood is coming. Yep. The rain is not going to stop. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. My current calling in our ward is gospel doctrine teacher. And, we just did Ether 1 through 6, and then we just did Mormon 1 through 6. I don't know how they do that, but in both cases, here we have a people who have been told that they have to get their act together, like Noah, and because everything's going to fall apart. Whether it's the Tower of Babel or whether it's Jerusalem, everything's going to fall apart, and you need to get out of there. I'm going to send you to the choicest land on earth, and it will always be a choice land as long as you're a righteous people. As you describe, the civilization, the Jaredite civilization, ended up destroyed. The Nephite civilization ended up destroyed. This American experiment civilization will end up destroyed. And there's nothing that's going to stop the rain from falling. And
it sounds so pessimistic, but it's true.
No, well, let me add the positive side. I think it's positive. There was an ark, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was, for the Nephite civilization, there were the Gentiles, us. This is our responsibility to take the gospel, the Book of Mormon, to the house of Jacob, to the Lamanites. That's the Gentile responsibility. So there's an ark, A-R-K, that's sitting there all the time, just waiting, inviting people to come aboard. That's what I'm getting at, is it's not, to me, the rain is not pessimism. To me, losing the culture war is not pessimism. Was I angry? I was angry about the whole thing. Yeah, I wish I could have done more. I wish I could have hit harder. And again, I don't even know what that would look like, because I hit hard. I say one progressive opponent of mine on Capitol Hill, after we in the minority killed a few things, he came to me and he's like, I get that you guys want what you want. Paul, why do you have to scorch earth everything? Well, because I don't want you to grow your nonsense anymore. I want to salt that field, right? So I've always been the fighter. I've always been the tip of the spear. So I think it is a transformative voice that I'm sharing, where I see we've lost. I know why we lost. I know how it happened. I was there in the middle of it for 40 years, in the middle of it. And yet there's hope. I have hope. My hope is my family. My hope is my generations. I'm hoping that my children in their families are going to be the kind of families that will invite people into their world and into their ark and say, yes, I know it's pouring outside. Come in here where it's dry and it's safe. And you're going to survive. You're going to survive. But you have to come inside. You have to walk through the doors of the house of the Lord. You have to enter the covenant of baptism. You have to take the sacrament. You have to do the ordinances. And at the center of everything we are as Latter-day Saints is the concept of exaltation. And that is a family project. That's not an individual thing. That's a family thing. There's a reason why you have the new and everlasting covenant of marriage. There's a reason why we fought for it as an ideal in civil society, that marriage ought to be between a man and a woman. Why would we do that, Greg? Why would we go out and do Proposition 8? Why did we fight in Hawaii and Vermont and California and Massachusetts? Why do we do all this kind of stuff? Well, I believe the seed of it is the doctrine that we understand about the new and everlasting covenant. And we don't want the rain to pour so heavy on everybody that they have no hope, that they can't find the ark, they can't see it, because society, mixing metaphors, because society now is so corrupt that you only see corrupt. You don't see a safe haven. You don't see the house of the Lord anymore. You just see a corrupt world in society. I think that's really why the Brethren were involved in the ERA and in all the gay rights stuff, but especially same-sex marriage. I think that's what motivated them. I don't think they were trying to be political. I think they were trying to buoy up the new and everlasting covenant. I think they were trying to create an environment socially, societally, that would lend itself to have an investigator go, yes, I want my family to be together forever. And how do we do that?
So you've got the church and you've got Babylon. What about Babylon entering the church?
Yeah.
What about the culture within the church?
It's horrible.
And what do we do about that? Right. Again, I go back to not being an activist, but putting awareness out there. That's probably my major focus is putting awareness out there to the church members.
Yeah.
What do we do with that? I mean, now we're not talking about going outside of it. We're talking about within our own church. So this is something that affects you when you go to your ward.
Right.
What do you hear at the pulpit? What are you hearing in your granddaughter's young women's lesson?
Yeah.
What about in the church?
Yeah. No, I go into priesthood all the time and I'm thinking, my gosh, what an idiot. What? Well, that is, I liked it better when high priests were separated from elders. It's just, there's something about young people who think they know everything and they know nothing. And yet they talk and talk and it's like, oh my gosh, just let me go home, please. But I don't think there's anything we can do about that. Here's what I think can happen and should happen, and that I recommend in the book. There's a chapter in my book titled The Handshake Between the Church and Babylon. And that is tax exempt status. That's the handshake. When we think about, forget about the financial side of tax exemption, right? Just forget about it. Forget about what the church might save in money and what we might save when we file our taxes, right? Mm-hmm. Let's just forget about that. Let's just talk about the reality of what that handshake means. That handshake means that a large part of our church, the Lord's church, is being overseen and dictated by Babylon. There's certain things that the church can't say. There's certain things that the church, and I mean the church as an institution, not us as members, but the church as an institution, they can't do. This is why every election cycle you get the letter over the pulpit that, we don't care who it is, however that's worded, right? We're nonpartisan. We elect who you want to elect. And of course, then the progressives use that to say, see, they believe in us, well, that's what I'm getting at. So I think, and I recommend that the church ought to start working right now to get rid of the tax exemption. The example that I use in the book is, well, the issue is that handshake between the church and Babylon through tax exemption affects us Latter-day Saints individually. And the example I use is what was called the Utah Compromise in 2015, where our church in Utah went to the state capitol and agreed to sign off on gay rights.
Spearheaded by President Oaks.
Spearheaded by President Oaks. Right. I think there's a couple other perpetrators in there. But yeah, I mean, and all of that, I believe, was this effort to protect two things. The timing of it happened before the same-sex marriage decision that came later that year. But I think the timing of it also was to influence that decision. But it was also to protect tax exemption. To say, look, we're cool. We don't hate anybody. We love everybody. We deserve the tax exempt status that we get. But what was the effect? The effect of the Utah Compromise was that our church was able to legally discriminate against gays. Our church as an institution. But we as Latter-day Saints,
in terms of like ordinances and temple marriage and other subsidiaries and what
I'm talking that they were exempt from the law.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the law covered, they were exempt from it. Mm-hmm. So in employment and housing. So
under freedom of religion.
Yeah. So in other words, you weren't, yes, that was in the name of freedom of religion. But the reality is that the effect was that the institution was allowed to legally discriminate against gays. You weren't going to see gays openly. I know that they exist on Temple Square, but not openly. And that's because of the church's exemption. But we, as members, were then stuck with the burden of the compromise. The church could legally discriminate, but a Latter-day Saint who owned an apartment complex couldn't. A Latter-day Saint that ran a business couldn't. And I remember, oh gosh, this was so vivid because it was kind of funny. I remember that the church lobbyist at the time, Bill Evans, he just passed earlier this year. I love the guy, dear friend. But he came to visit me. And we called them the home teachers because they always came in twos. But he came to visit me. And this time he didn't have his fellow lobbyist. He had Alexander Dushku with him. And Alexander Dushku is now a general authority, 70, mm-hmm. and he's legal counsel for the church. At the time, he was an attorney for Curtin McConkie, which, if you've ever seen the Tom Cruise movie, The Firm, mm-hmm. It's R-rated, so maybe many of your listeners haven't, but there's always a mafia law firm. Well, Curtin McConkie is the church's mafia law firm.
Interesting.
That's who, that's their stable of attorneys that they go to defend the church. Mm-hmm. And Alexander Dushku was a partner at Curtin McConkie. And the two of them came into my office, and I thought that they were wanting me to join the cause for the Utah Compromise to come. And I said no. And I turned to Bill, because he's a friend, and he was, he was a very pleasant looking fellow, but he was kind of a funny looking fellow too. And I said, and I looked at Alexander Dushku, I looked at Bill, and I said, okay, imagine Bill comes to work on Temple Square in a dress with lipstick and fake eyelashes. What do? Well, we don't let him do that. Well, why don't you let him do that? Well, because that's against what we believe. That just is against what we believe. So we would exempt our church, the institution, under employment laws from that kind of experience. That just wouldn't be allowed. But the members who run a business wouldn't be able to do anything about it. If you had a person who is at the cash register and he's been there for 5 years, and say it's Starbucks, and they're always, you own a Starbucks. I don't know why Latter-day Saint would, but say we own a Starbucks, right? And you come in for coffee, and you see me for 5 years giving you your coffee. And it's like, hey, Phil, how you doing? And then one day you come in, Phil comes in, and I'm in a dress and a hat and makeup, and in Utah, nothing could be done about that. You just let the guy dress like that, because the church exempted themselves, but put us as members in a position where we could not exercise our rights of individual conscience.
As members in Utah.
As members in Utah.
Yeah.
And that's the example that I use in the book, between the handshake between the church and Babylon. If we got rid of tax exemption, then the church as an institution could actually help us.
It wouldn't have to compromise
in our day-to-day lives. They could actually weigh in and help us inside our families. They could.
Here's a question though, real quick. Yeah. Are you saying they're not?
I'm saying they're not.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm saying they're not. I'm saying we.
Well, there's certainly. I mean, without question, and this is, I try to focus as much as I can on what is, right? What is?
Yeah.
And what is right now is that there is much less of boy, I hate to even say this. You bring up something in your book about current events and a class that you took at BYU.
Yes.
The Living Prophets and I can't remember what it was, but
that's what it was.
You say that back then they used to have a section on current events.
Correct.
And what they would do is they would bring in the doctrine of the church.
Yeah.
And use it. It's what I do with my podcast, right? And they would talk about current events along with that doctrine. They took that section out. They don't do that anymore.
No.
And so we don't hear this from the pulpit about, well, this is what's happening in society. I'm going to warn you about this.
Right.
You'll get a message that's very, honestly, it's wonderful, but if you don't know what you're listening for, you're not going to hear it.
Correct.
Right. And so, is that because of the tax exempt status that they're worried about?
Yeah. Yes, I believe. And so why was it allowed before and not now? I think it's what you described. There's an evolution. There's a progressive thing happening where I was there in 1980. In 1980, it was okay for the church to include a section on current events and tell you why the church isn't part of the John Birch Society, or to tell you why communism is a bad thing and not the United Order. They could do that.
Yeah, which is really great instruction.
It is. It's beautiful. I still have my copy. I still have it. I preserved it. And but today, society is so progressive that the church is basically forced to not talk about this stuff. And so what you get, say at BYU, what you get at BYU then is this idea that anything is okay because there's no more church voice about current events. The default is, well, then everything must be okay. It doesn't matter that I have students for same-sex marriage. That's okay. Doesn't matter that I have students for evolution. Students for whatever crazy progressive thing is out there. That it's all okay because there's no instruction anymore. And I guess what I'm getting at too, when I say that the church ought to stick to defending existential threats from existential threats. the tax exempt status is going to turn into an existential threat to the institution. I'm saying it's already an existential threat to us through the church, because we can't get the support. When we homeschooled and we were criminals in Virginia, I didn't go to my church. I didn't go to my bishop and say, hey, who's the best lawyer in the ward? Will you come defend me? No, I didn't do that. We just did it ourselves, Think of it today. It's that way. You're not going to go and say, hey, Bishop, this class at the local elementary school is horrible. Can you speak up during sacrament meeting? And no, you're not going to speak up during sacrament meeting. I think I know this is why I'm saying that all of my experience of 40 years is now boiling down into what I was going to say sediment, but that sounds bad. What's left after you boil everything away, and what's left is the family. What's left is you and me as fathers and grandfathers protecting and defending our faith within the family structure. And hopefully, if we're successful, that experience in our family will resonate out. People will see it. Just like I knew when the missionaries knocked on my door and I challenged them. I read anti-Mormon books. I laid into them. They totally helped me see truth, and I accepted it. When a ward member, I taught their oldest kid, 14-year-old girl in Sunday school. She always showed up with her scriptures. She wasn't yapping. She wasn't chewing gum. She wasn't trying to sit on the windowsill. She wasn't trying to turn her chair around and do whatever. She sat there, and she also knew the answers to questions. And I thought, who are these parents of this child? And then I find out they have 9 more like this. And it's like, well, what in the heck? And the guy,
somehow that's not a surprise.
We invited him over, and honestly, I said, you got to tell me at the heart of this. I get that we're all individuals and we have personalities and such. All our children do. They all have their weaknesses and shortcomings and strengths. What's at the heart of your family? And after he explained the family is at the heart of his family, he said, we homeschool our kids. He goes, I even hate to tell you, because you're going to hate me for it. You're going to hate me forever, because I'm telling you that part of the secret is to get your children away from that influence that's out there and bring them home. Nobody's asking anybody in homeschooling to be a genius. We didn't homeschool our kids, Greg, for academic purposes. We homeschooled our children to be good people, to be good people who could identify truth when they heard it. There's probably a lot of BS that came out of my mouth as a father at times.
But it was your BS.
What's my BS? It's probably...
No, it was your BS. In other words, it's coming from you, right? It's you're the father, you're a parent, you're giving instruction.
I'm overreacting about something, right? The littlest thing, my kids will tell you, Dad, I remember when you said, if I drank a Coke, I may as well drink a bottle of whiskey, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, they know
Yeah.
when we talk stupid.
Mhm.
They get it. But anyway,
It's interesting, because I've got a friend. I don't know if you know who Bruce Porter is, but he goes over kind of what we're going through right now in the church.
yeah,
And that is, he says, look, there's eternal laws at the top, and his focus on this is exaltation.
yeah,
And the eternal law above all other laws is no unclean thing can enter into the kingdom of God.
right,
And all of the gospel, including the atonement, everything is designed to overcome that problem, right? And it's all done out of love. And so you have that at the very top, which we seem to get less and less of, by the way, certainly at the lower levels of the church. I don't know when the last time was that you heard from someone else about exaltation, but it doesn't happen nearly as often as it did before. That doctrine
just in the temple. For me, it's just in the temple.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
right.
Exactly. And then from there you come down and you've got things like commandments or rather doctrine from below that. And then you've got commandments, and then you've got principles. And he says, we are right now in a state within church membership where we are focused on principles, right? It's the bumper sticker stuff.
Yep.
Right. And so we've kind of come down to that level because we're not getting at times that instruction for whatever reason, and you're giving a reason here, but it's like, I don't know. I mean, my wife says she's starving for this stuff sometimes, right? She's starving for it because, where is it? I want the meat.
Right. Yeah. And you know what? And ultimately, when Zion happens, I'm sure I'll be long gone, but when Zion happens, your wife will be in a community of people where meat is served every day, and she'll be full and she'll be happy, and that's not just an ideal, Greg. And I think this is where the rubber meets the road for me, and why I will say, why I'll argue with Latter-day Saints who believe, and they believe firmly about this, many of them, that you socialize your children by sending them out in the world. Okay, I'm telling you, that's Satan's way. That's his way of tricking us. Like, yes, don't you know that you'll have knowledge? That you'll be like the gods. If you go know everything that there is to know out there, you got to get out. No, the way you socialize is you as parents socialize them. I have met so many weird homeschool families in my life. Why are they weird? Why are the kids weird? Because the parents are weird. That's why. The parents are weird. So, it's not homeschooling that makes you weird. And it's the parents who make you weird. And it's the parents who also can set a Zion-like environment. And again, it's not perfect. You miss, back in the day, you miss family home evenings. You miss a prayer, family prayer. Something happens. Kids yell at each other. Doesn't matter. When it comes down to it, you're going to have more successful days than bad days when parents seize the right to be a parent, and they seize the right of control over their children, not the state, but the parent. And when they seize the right, now that is a challenge, of individual religious conscience. And that's President Oaks thinks, and Elder Dushku think that there's still religious freedom out there. And the only reason that they can think that is that handshake with Babylon. Babylon allows it to happen. And I'll tell you what, as soon as the church gets rid of their tax exempt status, yeah, then they'll understand what it means, what Zion means. They'll understand what it means to control individual religious conscience. They'll get it finally when they're free of that shackle, and it is a shackle. It binds the church from not being able to do certain things, not being able to say certain things, not having the current events section in the back of the religion class manual, because we're not going to invite that kind of controversy into our lives, right? We're not going to mix it up with Babylon. We can't afford to.
I'm going to bring this full circle and end with this. You made a statement in the book that's interesting to me, and I'd like you to expound on this. You're talking about what sets you apart from some of the other people that you worked with in politics. And you said, I quote, "I have the ability to internalize the beauty and heartbreak of the human experience." Why does that matter? And why would that set you apart?
Can you read the full? That's just part of a thought.
You say, what sets me apart from all of the others? I am not an ideologue.
Yes.
I am an honest truth seeker. Money, power, position, and seeking retribution through the spoils of victory are not characteristic of my work. Mostly what sets me apart are earned opinions, terrifying candor, and the ability to internalize the beauty and heartbreak of the human experience. All of these qualities, vulnerabilities, and lessons learned have made me a trusted advisor, leader, and honest narrator of the modern American culture war. But honing in on that again, the part that really interests me there is looking at internalizing the beauty and heartbreak of the human experience in all of that. What does that do for you?
It means that when I am defending the natural family by opposing gay rights, I actually see people. I don't see an enemy. It means that as a conservative, and I believe an authentic conservative, that the idea of Utah addressing immigration, a conservative can support comprehensive immigration reforms as opposed to enforcement only, because I see people. And, I caught a lot of hell when I was running Sutherland, and I came out in support of, back in 2010, after Arizona just passed a law. In fact, the Senate president was a stake president in our church. Can't think, Pierce was his name, Russell Pierce. He might have represented your district down there. I don't know.
Very possible.
Yeah. But, he came out with this bill, Arizona's enforcement only bill, basically saying the state of Arizona is not going to permit undocumented immigrants in its state. And it'll pull over if you look Hispanic, you can get pulled over and get asked for your papers. And, and I knew in my heart that's inhumane. And this is what I share in the book when I went and talked to a senior church official. And we were talking about something else. And as I was leaving, I say it in the book, I had my hand on the doorknob to leave. And I turned around to that leader and I said, "What's the church's position on immigration?" And this was in 2009, I believe. And he said, "I don't think we have one, but I do." And that's when he taught me a lesson. And he said, "Did you drive to work today?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Did you go over the speed limit?" I said, "Of course." And he said, "Did you feel like you had to confess your sins to your bishop?" I said, "No." He goes, "Why not?" He goes, "Because that's a man-made arbitrary law, a speed limit law, It's not even real in my mind. Safety is real. That's in my mind, safety is real. But speed as, 3 miles, 5 miles, 10 miles over, who cares?" And that's when he taught me, and one of my chapters is called Malum Prohibitum. And there's 2 Latin terms that this general authority lawyer, the biggest lawyer among the general authorities, said, there's malum prohibitum and malum in se. Malum in se means that what you just did was bad in and of itself. It's immoral. It's a sin. And then there's malum prohibitum, which are just man-made laws. He goes, "That's how I see immigration. These are just man-made arbitrary laws that the government sets for who can go and who can come in." And that's what got me thinking. And then back to your point and the quote that you just read, it's humanity. You see the humanity in people. You see it in yourself. Hopefully, you look in the mirror and you can be honest with yourself. You can look at your spouse, you can look at your children, the people you love, and you're going to be honest, but you're always going to see the humanity, the person. And as a conservative culture warrior, probably when I was younger and starting, I objectified my opponents as enemies. The more I got into it and the more I controlled and dictated my own career, the more I was able to stop objectifying people and stop seeing them as an enemy. I wrote in the book that there was a moment, Greg, where after Prop 8, the gay community, some of them, vandalized the temples in California. And they also released the donor list to Prop 8 in support of Prop 8. And a lot of people lost their jobs.
Yeah, I know some.
Because they did that. And it happened at a time when I had arranged a debate at the University of Utah, Sutherland Institute basically versus Equality Utah, which is the gay group in Utah. And I say that was a moment where I lost my civility, and I hit them hard. I punched down hard on them. One of them was in tears. The others couldn't believe what I was saying, and I was staring them right in the face while I was saying all of it. I just was they were my enemy. And it's funny because a Tribune reporter, who's now a spokesperson, by the way, for the University of Utah, Rebecca Walsh, she was a reporter for the Tribune, and she interviewed me after the debate. And she said, "That just seemed weird. Why would you be magnanimous and reach out to this group and create this debate to have a civil dialogue. And then you absolutely decimate them. And I explained what I felt at the time. Interestingly, a state senator who was on the other side of that debate, Scott somebody, a gay man, state senator, Rebecca Walsh, went and interviewed him about it. And without talking to me, he goes, I think it had to do, Paul was fine before Prop 8. And then all of a sudden after Prop 8, he got angry. And I think that was a result of that, you know. So the quote that you read, I think is how I've grown and had the ability to see people as people, to actually be Christ-like. That's foreign to me. And I want everybody to know, by the way, that I am not a self-righteous dude. I'm probably going to be the last person in line when my family goes to heaven and when my family gets exalted. They'll look back and they'll wonder, where's Dad? You know? So I'm not, when I'm recommending all of these things and when I'm sharing all of my life's experiences, but when I have all of these experiences to share, and I think every chapter is a learning experience for somebody, a faithful Latter-day Saint, hopefully. You know, I'm not setting myself up as some example or anything. Even when I talk about when we homeschooled, I'm not saying that, you know, I'm superior in any way, shape, or form. I'm not. And if you read my previous book titled Unworthy, you would know that I don't think highly of myself in any way, shape, or form. Anyway, I really feel like I can see people as people now. That's what that meant.
Yeah, appreciate that, Paul. And it's been fascinating talking to you, taking a deep dive into all of these things. I want to remind everybody about this book, right? Defeated by Paul Mero. It's a great read. I'm reading through it. I love the way you give a personal tone to it, because it's just like saying, hey, this is my life. These are the lessons that I've learned, and people ought to check it out. So I'll put that link in the description box so that everybody can grab a copy of that. Paul, thanks so much for your time. Excuse me. And we'll get you back on the program sometime.
You know what? Thanks so much, Greg. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate everything you're doing. You're putting yourself out there, and that's important. So thank you.
Appreciate it.